Okay, so I'm going to talk about the difference between formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is a collection of practices that focus on improving learning. So just like a portfolio or folder, anything that can be used to improve the learning of our students. Summative assessment is a type of assessment that evaluates learning rather than works to improve it. So just like a final exam, a midterm exam, a unit test, something at the end to assess their learning. So the impact of formative assessment is maximized if you pay attention to certain items. The first is the alignment to the instruction. So this would just be like making sure the assessment is on what they are learning in the classroom, things like that. So the next two are that it must be diagnostic for teachers and students. So both people should be able to use the information, students to improve their learning and teachers to kind of assess where the students are at in their learning. The next thing, which is probably the most important thing, is the timing of the results. You want to make sure that you're not assessing their practice. You want to make sure that you're assessing their knowledge at the end of the topic. If you're assessing their practice, it kind of discourages their learning. So the last thing is giving time for action. So you want to make sure that you give them enough time to apply the feedback that they're getting at the end of their assessment in order to improve their learning. So there are three main types of assessments. The first is a state or a provincial test, so just like the PSSAs, all of those. And this can either be formative or summative, depending on who is using the data. So whether it's like a grade or if it's for improving some type of program, anything like that, it all just depends on who is using the data. So if a state or province is using the data, it's summative. So if Pennsylvania were to use it, it would be summative. If a district or a teacher is using the data, it's formative. So this would just be like a unit test or some kind of test like that. The next type of assessment is a district benchmark, interim, or common assessment. So this would just be like trying to figure out where students are at and their reading levels or their writing levels, what math level are they at, things of that sort. And this depends on how the data is going to be used, and if it's going to be used to evaluate program effectiveness, it's summative. However, if it is going to be used to identify program needs, it's formative. So this would be also formative if it's used to plan an intervention for any kind of group or individual. That's specifically formative as well. So for classroom assessment, it's mainly formative unless it is determining for a grade for reporting purposes. Then of course it would be summative, just like a final exam or a midterm or a unit test. Then it would be summative if it was for that. So most of formative assessments in the classroom are used to adjust lesson plans, providing feedback to students, furthering instructions, self-assessing, and to set further goals. So it's mainly for planning. Teachers mainly use the information. The main person who uses formative assessment, though, just like I just said, are teachers. So it's generally used to answer the following questions, which are who is and is not understanding the lesson, and what adjustments should I make to the instruction. So who is the person that is understanding what I'm talking about? Who is sitting with their head down because they don't know what's going on? Who is missing words in the fill-in-the-blank worksheet because they can't follow along fast enough with the PowerPoint? What are the strengths and needs of the students, and what misconceptions do I need to address? Are there lapses in the directions? Do they not understand what I'm trying to say to them? You might think that they do, but then you might see that they don't understand once they start an activity or they start something else. So how do I group my students? Do I need to differentiate the lesson? Are their students ready for feedback? Do they understand what's going on? The teacher uses all of this information on a day-to-day basis just to adjust and better education. Without this, teachers would not be able to improve education for future students. So I would like to say thank you for watching. I hope that this helped further your understanding on the difference between formative and summative assessments, and that you were able to see how it can be implemented into the classroom.